Hey there, I'm Douglas from Draftbit. I'm excited to bring you a new long-form video series where we're going to be building an entire mobile app together using Draftbit and Xano. This series focuses on the Juno job board application, a platform that lets users search for jobs, apply to jobs, set up profiles, upload their resumes, and track their application status. In this first video, we'll kick things off with part 1 of the series. Today, we'll be building some of the essential starting screens: the splice screen, the get started screen, login, registration, and the onboarding screens. I'm going to walk you through what we're going to build. So when you first open the application, you're going to be taken to the login screen. Right now, we don't have an account, so I'm going to click I don't have an account. Then I'm going to fill in my information. Then here we can show the password, we can hide it. Then when we're ready, we create. So now that we have the account, let's try to log in. Then once we log in, it takes us to the getting started screen. So here, we're going to be able to onboard into the application. So let's click get started. Then we're taken to the onboarding screen. So before we can proceed to the home screen, or before we have access to the application, we need to complete the onboarding process. Okay, so that's done. We've uploaded an image, set the phone number and the address. So now when we go back, we'll notice our progress has been updated. We've completed 25% of the profile. Then up next, we have education. So we go ahead and then we set our education. Then now we have our education set. We can edit our education if we want. So here I can say mobile dev. And then now it gets updated. Then MSU University, we can change this. And that gets updated. Then now when we go back, our profile is now 50% complete. Then we go to experience. Then we save, and again we can edit. Then when we go back, our profile is now 75% complete. Then we can upload a resume. Then we have the resume uploaded. We can delete that resume. Then if we go back, our profile is now 100% complete. Then the final step, we need to create an application. So an application profile is basically, think of a situation where you can do two kinds of jobs. You can do web development. You can also do mobile development. So when you're applying to jobs, you need to create a profile that is tailored to the job that you're trying to apply to. So first, we come in here, we create the profile. Then this profile is going to be for web development jobs. Then here I'm going to pick the education. Then here I'm going to pick the experience. Then here I'm going to pick the resume that's going to be linked to this profile. Then I'll click save. So now, once everything is done, I can come back here and I'll see that everything is now completed. I'll go back to the application profile. Then I'll click complete onboarding. Then now I'm taken to the home screen. So we haven't started the home screen. The home screen, we're going to start it in the part 2 of the series. So now this user has now been authenticated. They've now completed their onboarding. So now if we go back to the login page and then we log in as that user, right? We shouldn't be taken to the onboarding screen. We should be taken straight to the home screen. Why? Because that user has completed onboarding. As you can see, it takes us directly to the home screen. If we go back, right? Yeah, don't mind me right now, we still don't have logout. So we're just going back. So let's create a new user. I'll call this test2028@gmail.com. Then I'll give them a password. Then I'll create the account. Then I'll update the password. Then I'll log in. So now it notices this is a new user who hasn't gone through the onboarding process. So they're then taken to the get started and then they go through the onboarding. So this is what we're going to be building in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. So first thing you're going to do, you're going to create an account with Draftbit. Then you're going to sign in, takes you to the dashboard, head over to workspaces, click new project. Then I'm going to give our project a name. I'm going to call mine job application. Then the app starts getting created. Click let's go. Then you're taken to the Draftbit editor. So I just put it on 75% so I can see better. So here is, you can put it on 100%, it gets bigger. You can put it on 150%. So this is how big you want it to be. So I just want it to be on 75% so I can see everything. So here we have our device preview. By default, it's on draft view. It can be on web preview, where you see how your application looks like on the web. It can be on iOS preview, where you get a real iOS device, where you can see how your application is going to look like on a real iOS device. Then you have Android preview. Then on the left side, you can see the screens. We can see the components, and this is the component picker. So we can pick any component that we want. For example, we can pick a button. And then we can see this button inside of our draft view. Then on the right side, whatever you have clicked, we're able to see the properties. So like styles, config, data, then interactions like the on press. What do you want to happen when you click the button? So with the basics out of the way, let's see what we're going to build. So firstly, we're going to build this screen. This is the splash screen. So this screen is going to welcome the users to the application. Head over to the left side where it says screens. And by default, you have this blank screen. Let's double click here. Then I'm going to rename it to splash. Let's head back to our design and see what it looks like. So here in our design, we have like a green background. Then in the middle, we have the logo. So let's head back. And wow, you're clicking on this component called splash. Head over to styles, scroll down where it says background color, then click here. Then we're going to add that color that we're seeing. But since this is a color that we're going to use throughout our application, instead of coming into here and adding the color physically each time that we need to use it, so I'm going to come here where it says styles and colors. I'm going to click. Then here where it says app, you can add a color. You just pick the hex code, or you can pick the color here. Then you can give it a name to say custom color 1 or something like this. Save, and that color gets added to our palette. So I already went ahead and I created some colors that we're going to use throughout the application. So this dark green is what we're seeing here on the background. So now when I put this dark green here, throughout my whole application, I can now use it. So let's head back to our splash component. Scroll down, go where it says color, background color. Then I'm just going to search dark green. Then click. And we get a dark green background. Then up next, we have a image or a logo that's in the center of the screen. So let's head over to our component picker, click add. Then we search for image component. And then click the image, then head over to the data tab, then click data. Then here, you're going to be able to upload an image. So yeah, I went ahead, I uploaded my logo. But then if you don't have anything here, you can click select a file or drag and drop. Then it's going to be uploaded inside Draftbit. And then you can pick. So right now I'm just going to pick, I think it was the white one. So I'm going to pick this one. Then head over to the image. I'm going to give it a width of 250 and a height of 75. Right, but still we can't see the whole image. So I'm going to go to the image config properties, resize mode, and then I'm going to pick contain. So that's going to contain the image and we can see it better. Then how do we get this image to be in the center? Because in our UI design, it's in the center. Go back to splash, styles. Then here, where it says align, I'm just going to align it to the center. that puts it on the center horizontally, but then I need it on the center also vertically, so it's somewhere here. Then there you have it. So now it's centered and looks like our design. So let's go ahead and see what it looks like on web. This is what it looks like on web, but then we're getting this header property. So it's telling us that this is the splash screen. We need to be able to remove this. So to remove this, we have to go to navigation tab. Then we go to the particular screen where we need this removed. Then config, then where it says show header, we just disable this. So now we no longer see this. So we can do it for all the screens where it says root navigator. We can disable it for all the screens, but we're not going to do that because some screens in our application are going to need this header. Let's head back. Then up next, we need to do the get started screen. So again, let's try to see what this screen has. So first, I can see a background image. Then I can see this list of jobs. It's like a deck of cards that are on top of each other. Then lastly, we have like this bottom view where we have text, and then a call to action button. I'm going to show you how we can build this easily inside of Draftbit. Let's head back. Where it says screens, click add. Then we're going to add a new blank screen. Rename it to getting started. We're still on web preview. Let's head back to draft preview. And what I need, let's go to the component picker. I need an image background. Then click the image background, go to data, then we're going to pick an image. So I have this background image. Then up next, we have this view and we have this bottom view. So let's go back. Then inside the background image, we're going to have two views. The first one is called top. The second one is called bottom, just to keep things easy to follow along. And inside top, you saw that we had these job listings that look like a deck of cards. So what I'm going to do, we're going to create a block. So a block is like a reusable element where you create it when you need an element that you can use on multiple screens. So on multiple screens, we're going to be using this job card. So I'm just going to create it as a block, and then on these multiple screens, I'll just be using it. So let's go ahead. Where it says screens, below that it says blocks. So I'm going to click that, and we're going to see we have a block called job card. So I went ahead and I already created this, just to save up on time. So I'm just going to explain what I did. So in this block called job card, I created a view component, and in that view component, we have three views. So the first view, I coded left, the second one middle, and the last one right. So this is just to simplify everything. So if I come in here, so if I go here and I click left, so this is going to be left. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see better. Perfect. So as you can see, when I click left, it highlights this logo. Then when I click middle, it highlights this middle part. Then right is this right section. So if we go on left, this is just an icon that's inside of a view. And this left icon has some padding and it has some background color. Don't worry, we're going to go through all these concepts in more detail. The middle is just going to be some text. So this which says operations manager, then Draftbit, then we have these small little tags. So very simple. Then we have the right. So the right just has this 1 hour ago. So it's just a text component. Then below that, we have an icon component. Then let's head over to our screen. Get started. Just to recap, we have an image background, we have a top, then we have a bottom. So in the top, you might guess, so the top is going to have those job cards that are stacked up on top of each other. Let's just go back and see what that looks like. So we have these job cards that are stacked up one on top of the other. So how do we build this kind of functionality where we have these jobs that are being stacked on top of each other like a deck of cards? So if we go ahead to the component picker, click add, Draftbit has this component called a deck swiper. And whatever we put in this component is going to act like a deck of cards and it's going to be stacked on top of each other. So inside the deck swiper card, I'm going to click add. Then now we're not going to be adding a component, but we're going to be adding the block that we just created, which is the job card. Now you can see what this looks like. So let's do some cleanup. You can see the text wiper came with its own background color, but we don't want that. So let's remove all these default things that it came with. So first, let's go to align and remove this. Justify, we remove that. Padding, for now, let's remove it. Border width, I don't think we need that for now. Then let's head over to the text wiper component. So here there are no styles. Then here there are not any styles, but let's just go to the background color and set it as transparent just to be safe. All right, and you see it then disappeared. So that was a good choice. Then what I want to do here where it says text wiper card, let's re-add that padding and see what that looks like. So let's say 20. And yeah, that looks good. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to go where it says text wiper. So the text wiper has some configurations that we can do to achieve this result, where we have these cards that are stacked on top of each other. Let's go back. So the first thing that we need to do, where it says infinite swiping, we enable this. Then where it says visible card count, we set this to 4. Then now we get that same effect. Okay, so let's close this text wiper. Then let's close this top. But then notice everything is at the top. We don't want that. So let's head back to the image background, styles. Then we go here where it says justify. Right now everything is at flex dot. You can see with this small little diagram, everything must be at the top. But then we don't want everything to be at the top, because in our design, it's starting kind of like in the middle. So we want everything to be at the bottom, right? Why the bottom and not the middle? Because remember, we also have the bottom. So this is the bottom. So right now we just did the top, and now we're doing the bottom. So if we say we want everything to be in the middle, then this bottom will be starting somewhere here, but we don't want that. So let's head back. Then in the bottom, we want a text, then another text. Then I think I saw a button, call to action button. Okay, then let's style it. The first thing that we need to do, we always need to add some padding. Then let's play around with this text. So when you click text, go to styles. We can pick a font. Then font weight, you can say semi-bold. Then the size. Then let's go back. So it's like black text. Your dream job is just one click away. Yeah, looks the same. Let's head over to styles. Then here where it says align, I want to center align the text. Let me zoom in a bit so you guys can see better. So there, your dream job is just one click away. Then up next, our dream job awaits. And this is like a grayish color. And it's way smaller than the first text. So our font is called Enter. Then here we can just say medium. So that was 22. This one I think is like 16. And the color. So we have lots of colors. So I'll just say something along the lines of Slate 400. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that looks okay. Then let's center that. Then lastly, let's work on the button. And our button first says get started. We need to change the color. The text is fine. And the size of the text, I think, could use a bit of work. So we can just say 18. Yeah, I think that's okay. Then the font, instead of system font, we can just say enter. That's okay. Then the color, it's a dark green. Remember that color that we added in our palette. Then if you saw the button, it had some rounded corners. So that's called the radius. Just going to set that to 20. And as you can see, we get the same effect. So right now we really can't see the difference. So what we need to do, we need to go back And one thing we see, the background is actually white. Right now our background is transparent. That's why we can see the image behind. So what we need to do, we need to go to our bottom view. Remember, everything inside here is inside this bottom view. So what we need to do, we need to go to background and we need to change that background and just type in white. And now our background is actually white. Let's go back and you'll notice this background has some border radius here. Ours is just straight corners. And then one other thing, the text actually has some space in between. So this text, and this button actually has some space in between. I'm going to show you how we can do that. We can do that in one of two ways. So we can come here where it says bottom, because bottom is the parent. Then we have this property called gap. So if I just say gap of 35, then immediately we get that space. But this looks like it's too much. So let's say 30. I think it's somewhere there. Okay, then again, the bottom and the top, we have to check which is their parent, right? So the bottom and top belong to the image background. So if we want to add some space between the bottom and the top, we have to target the image background and add some gap. So that's how it works. Then I forgot the border radius for this. So radius is going to be 20 again. But if I just do 20, it's going to target left, right, then bottom, left, then bottom, right. So I don't want that. I want to target each individual corner. So I have to come here where it says individual edges. On radius, I'm going to target top left. So I'm going to say 20. And as I do that, you can see we have this slight curve. Do I need to do more? I think that's okay. Let's have that back to 75%. Let's see what that looks like on web. And again, we have that problem that we had in the beginning where we're seeing the get started header. Again, we head over to navigate, get started, config, then we disable the show header. Now it looks okay. The button could use some extra padding. So if I go back to my button, styles, and where it says padding, let's just say 20. Yeah, I think that's about right. But then our border radius now needs some adjustment. So instead of 20, let's try 25. I think it needs to be more, so 30. And perfect. So yeah, I think that looks identical. And then the cool thing, since we use the deck swiper component, we can actually move these, right? And since inside the top deck swiper component config, we picked infinite swiping, we can keep going. Yeah, so it's just something cool that we can do in Draftbit. And this component is also useful, think of like a dating app like Tinder, where you're swiping left, swiping right, you can use this component. Then up next, we need to build the register screen. So as you can see, we have a logo, then we have some text, then we have some input fields. So 1, 2, 3 input fields. Then we have a button for creating the account. Then here, this is like a link. It says I already have an account. When you click this link, I guess it will take you to the login. So yeah, let's get started. So I think you're not getting the hang of it. We go to screens, click add, blank. Then I'm going to name this register. As you can see, we have that navigation header. Let's just get rid of that now. Then we remove that. Let's head back to the screens. Then let's strategize how we're going to do this. So let's head back. So what I think, we need 4 views. So the first view is going to hold the logo. The second view will hold this text. Third view is going to hold the form, which has these input fields. Then the last view is going to hold the button and the link. So head over to a component picker, click add, then add the view. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one, I'm going to rename it to logo. Second one will be welcome text. Third one will be form. And the last one will be button view. So yeah, that makes sense. And the first one, we have a logo, but then our logo is not an icon, it's an image. So let's click add. So if it was an icon, you'd search for icon. But since it's an image, we search for image. Then let's go right ahead. We're going to go to data. We're going to add this logo. Let's go 250. We don't want it too big. So height, I'm thinking 40. So yeah, it's very small. It just says Juno and it's very, very small. And I'm also seeing some padding around here. So we'll deal with that next. So for the image, let's go with 150. It looks good, but then the image is getting cut off. So to solve that, config resize mode. So when it's on cover, it's just trying to fit the whole view, like the whole available space. But we need to contain it so that we can see the whole image. And there you go. So let's head back where it says register. This is the parent. So we go to styles. Then what I want to do is add some padding. So padding is just going to be space, the space inside this register. The margin is going to be space around a certain view or a certain component. Let's head over and see our text. We have two texts. The first one, get started. The second one, fill out the form below to get started. So in our welcome text, we're going to add two. Okay, then the first thing that I'm going to do, so yeah, it's going to say getting started. Style it a bit. So we'll go to font. I would say it's semi-bold. In size, let's start with 18. Let's choose. Okay, that looks good. And fill out the form below. So you notice everything is too close together. So what we need to do, go back to the register, styles, and remember to add space in between the child components. We have to add some gap. So let's say 20 for now. We can always come back and adjust. It's not the proper size. And I'm also seeing that my logo is a bit too big. So 100. Yeah, I think, or even 80. Right? Yeah, I think that's okay. Then get started. So inside get started, there's a bit of space. So in between get started and fill out the form, there's some space. And again, remember, we go to the parent component of welcome text. So this is the parent component and these are the children. So when we're on the parent component, go to styles, then go to gap, then we can add some gap. Then notice we now have a gap. It's very simple. Now we're on the form, and for that, we need name, email, and password. So while we have the form clicked, let's click add. Then we're going to search for text input. So we're going to have one. And the first one, we're going to call it name. The second one, we're going to call it email. And let's dial these two for now, then we can do the rest. But already I'm seeing that they're all touching. So we need to go to form, styles, then add some gap. Might need to add more. Yeah, because I think they put 20. And yeah, that looks much better. So let's go to name, styles, then let's remove these pre-configured styles that it came with because I need to add my own. So yeah, where it says padding, I'm going to put 20. And yeah, that looks big enough like what we have here. But then here we also have some border radius. looks like 20. And perfect. Then where it says enter value, it needs to say name. So let's go to the data property. Then here where it says placeholder text, it needs to say name. It's like a different color. So we come here where it says placeholder text color, and it looks to be medium. Then again, it looks very small. So we come here where it says font, pick enter font, then semi bold, then size, let's have 16. So what I'm thinking, instead of doing the same thing for email, I'm going to delete email, go back to name, then I'm going to duplicate name. So now, there we have it. Then here, just rename it to email. Then I have to go to email, data, placeholder, rename that to email. Notice the gap here is a bit bigger than we thought. So let's go to register. And for that, let's try to put 40. And yeah, starting to look like it looked in the design. Then for the password input, so it has a password, and then it has this checkbox component where you can choose to hide the password or choose to show the password. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back here. Then here where it says text input 3, I'm going to rename this to password. But then I need to put this inside of a view component. So another simple way of doing that, instead of going to form, adding a view, dragging this password and dropping it in that view, I can just come here to password, click these 3 dots, then I can say add parent. The parent is going to be a view. Then here I'm just going to call this password view. So you don't have to rename these views or these components, but just do that because it's best practice and it allows you to be able to easily identify these components. So now we have password view. Remember, we have password text input and we have our component. Then we have that I component where we're able to show or hide the password. So for that, you might think we'll be using an icon button, but for this use case, it's not going to be correct. So we're going to be using a checkbox. So firstly, we need to go to the password. We need to remove this padding. Then lastly, we need to remove the borders. Then perfect. So this is still an input, but it's not really visible. What we need to do, we need to go to the password view. Then here where it says flex direction, it needs to be row because right now it's one on top of the other. So it's a column. We need to make it a row so that this input goes to the right side. Okay, perfect. Then we have to go to the password because if you can see, this input is taking up the whole of our width. So to do that, we go to the password where it says flex, we put 1. So this tells it that take up the whole of the available space. Then we go to our password view where it says border, we say 1. Then we give it a border color. Try to match the other inputs. So let's see. Then for the password view, let's add some padding. So padding is going to be space in between. And as you can see, that's what it looks like. And we need some border radius. So let's have 20. And yeah, starting to look like the other inputs, just that the color of the border is a bit off. So the color is base. Let's go back to password view. And for this, the color is base. Perfect. And where it says enter value, so let's go ahead, data, placeholder, we're just going to say password. Then now we have our checkbox. When we click it, it checks. When we unclick it, it unchecks. So we need to replace this with this eye icon. When we click, it shows an eye. When we unclick, it crosses the eye. So let's go back. We go to checkbox. Then we go to data. Then for the checked icon, we want a crossed eye. So let's just search for I, and I think I already have that. So let's just choose between this or this. Let's have this. Right, and then let's click. Okay, so we're getting the I, but I think because checking should be showing, right? So I think for this should be the other way around. So let's have an I. Then for this, we're going to have this. Then when we uncheck, that's when we have the crossed I. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So by default, we get this uncrossed, meaning that you can't see your password. Then when we do this, we can see the password. Then let's play around with the color. Then the size, let's have it be 24. See how big that looks. Okay, that looks pretty standard. Then the text again. Okay, perfect. So now this is just pretty much the design. We need to implement the functionality. So let's just finish the design, then we come back for the functionality. So the font is going to be enter, the size, medium, and perfect. So lastly, so our form is done. Lastly, we have the button view. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So that's just a simple button called create account. Then below that, we have a link that says I already have an account. So let's go back. And to save time, remember we've already created a button inside the Get Started screen. So we go to Get Started, then we take our button that we created. Then here, where there's 3 dots, mark for copy, go back to our register screen. Inside the button view, click the 3 dots, then paste the button. And there you have it, we have a button. Then here, we're going to say register or create account if we want to be accurate. Then inside that view, we have a link. So the link, we just have to style it. But first, I already have an account. So when you click this link that says I already have an account, it's going to be able to take us to the login page. So inside the button view, let's add a gap of 10. Then let's style the text. So enter, then the size should be 16. Medium, the color should be medium. Then this should be center aligned. So something like this. So now we'll be able to click this, but right now we haven't set anything up, so nothing works. But yeah, we're making some progress. So what we need to do now, we need to duplicate this register screen. It creates a new register screen, which is an identical copy of the first one. But then this, we're going to call it login. But then we have this header again. So let's go to navigate, config, and hide it. Then now let's do some housekeeping. The logo, we need it. But then this, which says getting started, we no longer need this. So let's remove this. The name, we no longer need this. We don't need the name to log in. Right? But we do need the password. So we're going to keep that. Then the button, instead of create account, it's going to say login. Then I already have an account. We need to change this to I don't have an account. So when someone clicks this, we take them to the register screen. So if you're still with me, give yourself, a tap on the back. Congratulations for making it this far. We made the splice screen, the get started, the register, then the login. So up next, we're going to be adding the functionality, connecting to a backend API, and actually registering, creating an account, and actually logging into the application. Okay, so for this build, I'm using Xano. So I went ahead in Xano, created a basic project. Then I created some endpoints for authenticating. So I have 3 endpoints. The first one is for signing up. The second one is for logging in. Then the last one is for authenticating yourself. So on this one, you send it the auth token, then it sends you back the record of the user. So the first one that we're going to be looking at is the signing up. And it's very simple. What we need to do, we need to send this endpoint a name, an email, and a password. Then it's going to register that user, right? So let's head back to our application. And before we're ready to send anything to the backend, we need to actually sort where this email and password is going to be stored. So what we need to do, head back to register, click form, then click name. So if you go here where it says data, there's this thing called a data source. So whenever I enter anything inside here, notice the name and the email is getting populated. Why? Because they're sharing the same data source. Because remember, we duplicated it. So what we need to do, that's not correct. So what we need to do, we need to come here where it says variables. Then I'm going to delete all the variables. So you can just rename them, to be faster, but I want to show you how we can start from the basics. So what I need to do is I'm going to add a variable. It's going to be of type of string. This is going to store our name. Then the next one is going to store our email. Then the last one is going to store our password. Then remember, this is the checkbox value, but I'm just going to rename this to say show password. All right, so we do that. And by default, I want show password to be false. So I think we should start with that. So let's head over to our password input. So we have this input here which says password input. So if I say true, whenever I enter anything inside here, so even though they're still connected, but whenever I enter anything in here, in this password, you see it has these dots because I told it that this is a password input. So instead of telling it physically, I'm going to point it to this show password variable. So now where it says show password input, I'm going to show password. All right, then let's see. So by default, right, so let's go back. By default we set it to true, but by default it should be true. So instead of saying show password, it should say hide password, right? So it makes sense. Okay, so now by default it hides the password, but then when I click this, I need this to then show the password, as you can see, right? It then needs to show the password. So this is now opposite, right? So let's go back, then check the icon. This is now going to be crossed. Then this one is going to be showing, right? So now, then when I click show, shows the password. So let's fix the second issue. On our data source, for the name, we need to point it to this screen variable called name that we just created here. So if you see, it says screen variables, and we just created a name. So we're now pointing that name, that whatever you put in here, it needs to go into that variable. Then email, we're just telling it whatever you put in this input should then go to email, right? So now notice we don't have that situation where it's now typing everywhere. So it's now looking good. Then for password, it's going to go to password. Everything looks okay. Then, yeah. Then what I need to do in variables, I need to create a variable called loading. And by default, this will be false. Then I need to create a variable called error message. It's going to be storing any error messages that come from the backend. then yeah, this page is now ready. So what I need to do, to go here where it says data, then it's going to ask me, what's the name of your backend? If you have a custom API, then you just pick here where it says add your custom API. I'm using Xano, so I'm just going to click Xano. Then here where it says name, I'm going to call this auth service. Since I'm just authenticating, then here where it says development URL, you go back to Xano, then you copy this endpoint URL. Then, so they want the base URL. So here where it says sign up, we don't really want this. So they just want this part. Then once you do that, you click save service. But then this service needs some endpoints. The first endpoint that we need, if we come back here, we'll see it says auth sign up. So that's the first endpoint that we need. So if you come here, it says new endpoint. What do you want to call this? I want to call this sign up. And it's a post request. Then here it says object and row. Here you say, what object are you trying to create? I'm trying to create a user. This helps Draftbit know where to store this request. So it really doesn't matter what you enter here, but it just helps it know how to organize these requests for you. So what are you doing? I'm creating something. Then we go to path. So path is /auth/signup. Then request body. Let's go back. So I click run in Xano. It's going to give me an example of a body of what it expects. If I come back here, I'm just going to paste this here. Then where it says test, I'm going to put some double curly braces. So this is called a variable in Draftbit. Then email, then password. Right. So once I do this, you're going to see here it says variables. So I need to then set these variables. So for email, I'm just going to say test 2024@gmail.com. Then name test 2024. Then password 12345678. Then T. Okay, but this is not yet done. We need to test this. So we go to test and preview response, scroll down, then click test. Then once we get this token, we know that it was a success. Then we save. And let's close this. Then what we need to do when the user clicks this button, so let's go back to this button that says create account. What we need to do, we need to go to interactions, on press, then it opens the action editor. The first thing that I need to do is set a variable. This variable is called loading. So I need to start loading. So I'm going to set this to true. And what do I want to happen when this variable is set to true? I want to go to the button, data, and I want this button to start loading. So when I click this button, it's going to start loading. So I need to tell it here that you need to start loading. And remember, we have an error message. And to show this error message, I'm going to do it inside this button view. I'm going to add a text. And this text is going to show the error message. And the color. But remember, I have to set that error message. So it doesn't just show up, by default. I have to set it. So I'm looking for a color. Yeah, this danger color. Perfect. Then I'm going to center it. So right now I'm not seeing anything, but I'll be able to see if there's an error. So let's go back to our button. So when the button is clicked, it's going to start loading. So when we click this button, it starts loading, but nothing happens. So when it starts loading, what do I want to do? I want to make an API request. So these are actions. And it asks me, which endpoint do you want to make that call to? And remember, we went to data, we created this auth service, and we created this API endpoint called sign up. So we need to go back to this, and then we're going to select that API request that we created. So when it says service, going to say auth service, then sign up. So right now we just have one, that's why it auto selected. And remember, these are the values that we're getting. But then now we're not going to be using these values. We're going to be using the values from our form. So we're going to be passing the name, the email, and the password. And where are we getting it? Remember, when you enter a name, it gets stored in this screen variable called name. So what we need to do, we just need to point this name to the screen variable name. So now we're going to be sending the name to the backend. Then for email, then for password. And remember what our response looked like. It said auth token. So what we need to do, we need to have an if statement. And we need to say if response.auth token is true, so that means we're successful. So if that's true, then we're going to navigate somewhere, right? And right now we just want to navigate to the login. So it means our registration was a success, then we're going to navigate you to the login screen. But then if it was a failure, what do we want to do? So if it was a failure, we want to set a variable for error message. And we want to set it with the response.message. So it returns, my backend is returning a response.message with the message of what went wrong. Then after all of this is done, I need to stop loading. Remember, we're still loading through this whole process. So now I need to set loading back to false. Okay, let's test it out. So I'm going to say Douglas 2024. Douglas 2024. Yeah, I still keep thinking we're in 2024. Okay, then password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, then D. Then create account. Then the account was a success. And to test that out, I'm going to come back here. Then and as we can see in our database, it created a user. So Douglas 2024 at gmail.com. So this was a success. The next up, let's work on the login screen. So that was the register screen. So we now have the ability to register users. But before we do that, let's go back to the register. And what I want to do, I want to register the same user. I want to see if my system is smart enough to know that this user already exists. And now this account is already in use. How does it know that? Remember, it's giving us an error message and we're setting that to a variable called error message. And this variable, we're displaying it as text below this. And it only shows if it has a value. So if it doesn't have a value, it doesn't show. And that's perfect. Let's head over to login. And for login, we're doing the same thing. Variable, we're going to, so last time we deleted the variables, but for now, let's rename. So you can delete, you can rename. There's no right or wrong way. Remember, we don't have name for password. So we just have email, and then we just have password. So let's delete name. And you can even see name, it says 0 components. So when it says 1 component, it means this variable is tied to 1 component. So right now it's even telling us that we don't have any component that's tied to email or name. Okay, so let's delete name. Then checkbox value. It's going to be hide password. And by default, it's going to be true. We go to email. Then let's set that to email. We go to password. That's already being done. Then password input. It's going to be hide password. Then now let's test this out. So by default, it hides, then it shows, but then this is opposite. So we need to go back to the checkbox and fix that. So yeah, on checked icon, it's supposed to be the other way around. Then here, it's supposed to be this. So now, when I enter this, we can't see. Then when I enter this, now we can see. Perfect. Okay, then next up, let's add the text. Then let's sort the text out. It's going to be red. Enter, then medium, 16. Then danger, center aligned. Perfect. Go back to variables. We need to create a variable for loading. It's of type Boolean because loading can be true or false. By default, loading is false. Then we have an error message. Right? It can be a string. Don't really care about that. Then yeah, that looks good. So here on the text, instead of this basic text, we need to create a variable called error and set that to error message. Okay, that looks good for now. Then button data, we need to assign the button to the loading. So when loading is true, we're going to have a loading feature here. Then now, when the button is clicked, right? Remember, we set a variable. Which variable do we set? We set loading to true. Then, yeah, that's a good point for now. What we need to do, we need to go back to data of service. We just have sign up here. We now need to create an endpoint for sign in. Right? And for this, we go back to our backend, API, authentication, and login. So this endpoint is called login, and it's a post request. It needs an email and a password. Let's go back, sign in, it's a post request. So we're going to be creating a user. Then for the path, let's log in. Then for the request body, let's go and see what that looks like. It's just going to be an email and a password. And we need to make this a variable. So later on in our action editor, we can pass a value to it. So here it's going to be email. Then here it's going to be password. Then here we get the variables, email, password. Remember, the email was douglas2024@gmail.com. Password was 1234567 Then we're going to test this out. And if it's successful, it should send us back an auth token. And perfect. Send us back an auth token and the user. Then we save this. So now we have our endpoint. So how do we use it? When a user clicks login, we need to first set the variable to loading, then make an API call to the backend and the response. So here you're going to say is result name. What do you want the result to be called? And I want the result to be called response. And the service is going to be auth service. We're not going to be signing up this time. We're going to be signing in. And it asks me for email. Remember, email is in a variable called email. Password is in a variable called password from our form. Then, what do we want to do with the response? We want to check, right? What are we checking? We're checking if the response.auth token came back. So if an auth token came back, it means that the login was a success. And if the login was a success, right, I want to navigate somewhere. If it was a failure, I want to set a variable. And which variable do I want to set? I want to set the error message. I want to set it with the response.message. All right. And so right now, since we don't have anywhere to navigate to, we can hide this action. And we're just going to alert and say success. Then login was successful. But later on, we'll be able to navigate to the home screen or to onboarding if login is a success. So now we're just testing it out. So for now, let's say Doug, then here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, D. Then login. Then it tells you invalid email format. So this is not a real email. So it's actually now validating. It's going to the backend. The backend is like, wait there, that's not a real email. Then it brings us back that message. But notice it keeps on loading. So let's go back to the on-press. Remember, we set loading to true, but when everything was done, we forgot to set it back to false. So it keeps on loading because it doesn't know that it's supposed to stop. Okay, now Douglas 2024 at gmail.com. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 D. You can see if that's correct. Then login. Login was successful. So yeah, perfect. Now we're going to move on to the onboarding screen. But before we do that, I went ahead and I did a few things. So if we head back to the login button, then on press, remember we're navigating on login success, but then now we're doing something else. When we log in, we get back an auth token. And now we're saving this auth token to a device variable called token. So I close this, then head over to variables, then head over to device variables. We now have this new variable called token. So to create a variable, you just come here where it says variables, and then you can say token, then you click add. Then that variable gets created. And this is a device variable. So these are app-wide variables that allow you to store data on the user's device. These are different from screen variables in that a screen variable, when the application reloads, it gets deleted or it gets cleared. But then a device variable is going to persist until the user clears their device storage. So what we want to do now is create a new screen. And this new screen, we're going to call it onboarding. Then what we want to do, we want to go back to the login screen. And on login, we're going to navigate to the onboarding screen. Now let's close this. Then let's come back. The login is successful. It tells us login was successful. Then takes us to the onboarding screen. And what I want to do here for the header, go to navigate, onboarding, and this time we want a header, but then we want this to be in the center. So we go here where it says title. Then we're going to say center. Then that takes this to the center. Then for the back area, so this is the back icon that you see over here. So I'm going to choose this icon. Then what do I want this back icon to do? So I come here where it says interactions, and on back icon press, I want to navigate back. Okay, then let's head back to the screens. So here we have an onboarding screen. Now let's look at the design. So yeah, we have a design which has, I would say, two parts. So the first part is this progress information that tells us how much of the profile we've completed. The next part is a group of these cards. We can call them cards. So it's a group of these cards that are navigating us to a certain aspect of the onboarding process. The first part being personal information, second part being education, third part being experience, which makes sense. It's a job finding application. And when you're onboarding, we need to know your past education, we need to know your experience, we need to know your resume, and then you need to make a profile. So a profile would say something like when you're applying for different jobs, maybe you're a web developer. While list, you're also a mobile developer. So you need to have the ability to be able to create profiles for that target different jobs. So that's what we need to create now. So the first part, I'm going to have two views. I'm going to have the view for this progress. Then I'm going to have a view for these cards. Okay, then let's go back to the UI. So for the progress, we have this circular progress. Then inside, we have a value that's showing a percentage. Then we have a text, then another text. So I guess I could have two views. So one view for this progress, then another view for the text. So inside the progress, I'll have two views. The first one, I'll call it status. Second one, I'll call it text. And inside status, if we go back again, we'll notice we have a circular and then we have a percentage. So let's go back. Then inside status, we have a view and another view. And this is going to be, let's call it bar, then text view, right? And inside this, we're going to have a circular progress bar. We're going to make it 80. Okay, I would say that's an okay size. Then for the text, then inside this text, it's going to say 45%. Okay, that's okay. So for now, let's close this. Let's close. So we go to the status, text view, then bar. So this is the bar, then this is the text view. So let's close the status up. Then let's go to our texts. We have 1, we have 2. And the first one says 1/4 completed, like this. The second one, fill out the forms below. So I think it was saying something like that. Okay, then we go back to the progress and everything was centered as you saw. But before we do that, let's go back and take a look. As you can see here, we have a background color. It's like a light gray. So we go back to onboarding, background color. So there's this color called slate. So I think it was like a slate 200. Right? So that was the background color. And the progress was white. And yeah, it's starting to look nice. Then inside the progress, I need some padding. Okay. Then I need some radius, which was like a 20. Then everything was centered. So I have to go to flex, align, center. Then everything becomes centered. Then I go to status. But before status, I need to center the text. Right, and this looks okay. Then let's do some typography. So this is a bold, then this is like a gray color. So let's go to the first one. And for the font in this application, we're going to be using Inter. And this was a semi-bold, and it was like an 18. Right, that looks okay. Then the one that was below, I would say was a 14. And the color was a light gray color. Yeah, there was a gap inside, I would say of 5. Perfect. Then now, let's look at this value, the 45%. I guess the size is the same as this, so in 18, but it's not bold. So I go inside status, then I go inside the text view. So it's a regular. And the size, I'll say 18. Yeah, I think that's okay. But then now, how do we get this 45% to be inside this circular progress bar? So what we need to do, we go to the text view component. And in Draftbit, whenever you add a component, it follows a certain hierarchy. It doesn't just go wherever it wants. It will follow a certain hierarchy where one item goes on top, the other item goes below. Then there are some instances where you can change that direction from that column to be a row. And then one thing will be on the left, the other will be on the right. But then what if we want something to be on top of another thing? So in that instance, we'll need to use something called an absolute position. So if we go to our text, then let's look for it. So here where it says position, there's relative, then there's absolute. So when you say absolute, that's going to go above the circular bar. Then, to then pinpoint it where we want, we then play around with this position. To say on the left side, I want 20 points. Then notice what happens. It's going to move to the middle. So 25. Right? Then on the top, I'll say I want something like 35. Okay. Say that's a bit too much. So let's say 30. And yeah, that's how you get something to go on top of something else. Then inside the progress, between the status and the text, so this is the status, these are the text, there was a bit of space. Not much, but there's a bit of space there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to gap, just going to put 5. And yeah, that looks okay. So for the color, we're not really concerned, but yeah, we can put a color here, but we're not really concerned with the color for now. Let's just make it look nice. So the progress is done. Then next up, we're going to focus on the cards. So first up, let's have a view. And this is for the singular card. Then let's go back and look at the structure. So the first thing we see is a checkbox. Then these texts. So the first text component, then the second text component. Then lastly, we have an icon. So we need 3 views inside here. So for this, it's not complicated. So this whole thing is the view that we call the card. Then this, we can call it left, middle, right. So that's what I do just to make it simple. So this is the card. And if we go back, we see the card. It's a grayish color. Then it has a border. So I can do that even now before we start. So, and I'm guessing we're going to need some padding. Yeah, by default, we always need padding. Then background color, I would say it's a gray 200 or 300. We'll come back and see. So right now you won't be able to see anything since we don't have anything yet. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add 3 views. 1, 2, and 3. All right. Then the first one, I'm going to call it left. The second one, I'm going to call it middle. Then the last one is going to be right. Then I'm going to go back to card. I'm going to change the direction to a row. Then inside the left, we add a checkbox. And remember, this checkbox is not a square. So the normal checkbox comes in as a square. This checkbox, if we go to the settings, and so we need to disable it because I don't think you could use it. Then the unchecked icon was a circle. All right, so it's a circle like this. Perfect. Then in the middle, we had some texts. So we had 1. Then we had 2. Right, it's coming out. Then lastly, we had an icon. So this icon was just like a right arrow, like this. Yeah, but then notice how everything is combined together. It's not looking nice. So what we need to do, we go back to the card. Then I'm going to try to center align it. Okay, perfect. Then what I need to do, I need to go to the middle. Then I need to tell the middle to be flex 1. That means it should take up as much space as it can. So it's going to push this to the right. Then we go to cards, onboarding. Then we're going to add some gap so that this is not touching the status. Then now we're able to see it much better. Then we go back to the card. Then in the card, I'm going to add a gap of 10 so that we have space in between this and the text. So yeah, starting to look a bit much better, but then the color is still a bit off. So let's go back and see. So the color looks like this. So what I need to do is add a border. So while I've clicked the card, I'm going to go to borders and I'm going to say 1. Then I'm going to add a border color. Right? Now we're starting to look nice. Let's go back. We see the borders have a bit of radius and we need more padding. So if we go back to the card, we go back to padding, we can add 30. And yeah, then some border radius, 20. And perfect, starting to look much better. The middle, text. And what does this say? Let's go back. So this says personal information. If we go back, the font is obviously enter. It's semi-bold, then 16. Much better. Let's go for the second part. Enter. It's a bit smaller, so I would say 14, and it's gray. Yeah, something like this. And we need a bit of gap. Then inside this, it says your name, contact email, phone number, address. And yeah, this is looking good. So what we need to do now is we need to duplicate this. So 1, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we go back to cards. See how they are touching. We just go to cards, then we add a gap of 20. Then that's solved. Then what I need to do, go back to onboarding, config, and make sure we can scroll through this view. So now we can scroll through this view. Then let's fix the rest of these items. We have education, fill in your educational information for consideration. And yeah, that looks good. Then one last thing that we need to do before we move on, these cards need to be clickable. So what we need to do, we need to wrap each of these cards in a component called a pressable. So a pressable is a component that can be wrapped around any other component and allows us to be able to press that component. So it now behaves like a button. So inside this card, just come here, click add parent, and search for pressable. Okay, then now, whenever we need to click this, we're able to do so. And it now has this interaction code on press. So now when we click on press, we can navigate or we can perform a certain action. Now we need to fill in this information from the backend. So if we head over to my Xano backend and we head over to user. So if we head over to Xano and then we head over here where it says user get status. So what I'm doing, I'm just having a simple function that checks if the user has completed certain parts of the onboarding. And if they've done so, we bring back a percentage to say what percentage have they completed. And since they need to complete 4 parts, we'll say they've completed 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, or 4 out of 4 to signify that they've completed the whole onboarding. So let's go back. And this is going to be helpful for filling in this information. So let's head over to data, and I've already gone ahead and I've created the backend service to get this information. So now we go to get onboarding status, and what this is doing, it's going to our backend and fetching that information. So now what we can do when a user visits this onboarding screen, we can go to the action editor and then we can make an API call. And what we're getting, we're turning it as a response, and onboarding, what we're doing is we're getting onboarding status. And for now, I just want to log that information, so I can actually see if I'm getting something in response. Let's open my console. And now when this page runs, we'll notice that we have progress of 1, percentage of 25, and onboarding complete is set to false. So why is this saying progress of 1? It's because when I was testing out with this account, I was filling in some information, and now the backend knows that I've filled in part of that information, like the name, the contact, and the email. So that's why it's saying progress is 1 and percentage is 25. Then again, if I come in and I fill in the education part, then this is going to be 50% progress, 2 out of 4. Then when I fill in experience, then I think you get the point. So now what I need to do is create a variable to store this information so that I can pass it down to these components. And I'm going to give it a default value. So in an event where it's still fetching, it doesn't just show nothing. At least it can show us 0. So for progress, that'll be 0. Percentage, that'll be 0. Then onboarding complete, that'll be false. Then we can save that. Let's head over to the progress, then status, bar, then circular progress. Then here, it's looking for a value. So I'm going to go to status dot percentage. So that's going to be the value, and by default it's 0. Then we're going to go to the text. Instead of 45%, I'm going to make this a variable so it can be dynamic. And now, instead of 45%, we're going to be passing in the status dot progress. And now, by default, it's 0. Then, up next, we go to 1/4 is completed. We delete the 1. We put a variable here, call it value. Then, we're going to pass in status dot progress. And that's going to be 0/4. So let's go back just to see if I did everything correctly. So the value, let's see. So here this might be wrong because I think it should be status dot percentage. Yeah, status dot percentage. Perfect. So this is now hooked up. If you go back to onboarding, on focus, instead of console logging this response, let's delete that. I'm going to set a variable. So I'm going to set that variable that I created called status, and the new value is going to be my response. And now when it loads, it first displays that 0, goes to the database, fetches the real values, then it displays those. And we're going to have some logic later on such that when this is completed 4 to 4 or 100%, then we can say onboarding is completed, and we can allow the user to proceed to the home screen. So the user is not allowed to proceed to the home screen right now because they've not completed the onboarding process. So remember, this is a job application system. A user cannot apply to jobs if they've not completed their profiles. So we need their education history, we need their experience, we need their resume, we need their application profile, and we need their personal information. Okay, so let's go ahead to screens. Let's create a new screen. This new screen will be onboarding personal. And let's go back to onboarding. So when we click here where it says personal information, we need to be navigated to onboarding personal. So let's go on pressable, the first one. Then when you press this, it's going to navigate to the onboarding personal screen. It goes to the screen. So let's head over to navigate center. So for the onboarding personal, set over on the left, I want this to be in the center. When you click the back button, I want to navigate back. So navigate back just takes you back from where you came from. So again, let's go back to the onboarding screen. Let's click personal information. So it takes us there. Then when we click this, it navigates us back. Perfect. Up next, we're going to look at the onboarding personal information. Let's take a look at what the screen entails. So the first thing, we have an image. Then we have this edit. So which I'm guessing when we click this, we should be able to select an image, then upload it to this form. We have the name, the email, the phone number, and the address. And if you remember when we created our account, we supplied the email, we supplied the name. So these values, we shouldn't be able to change them. We should just be able to see them. So we should be able to fetch this data from the backend, populate these fields, but then we don't have the phone number or the address. So these will be blank and you can fill them in and save. Let's go back. Onboarding personal. And we need a first view that's going to hold the profile picture. The second view that's going to hold the form. And the last view that's going to hold the button. So the first view, we're going to call it profile picture. The second one will be form. Then this one will be button view. The first one, we're going to have an image and an icon button. Let's add some padding. Remember, we always want some padding. Let's see if there's any background color. There is. So the background color is going to be slate 200. Has a border radius of 100. So that makes it a circle. Bind this to the center like this. Have a gap of 5. Then for the icon button, I'm going to look for edit. Close this. Go back to our form. And let's take a look. Text input. So I'm just going to say input. Create one, then duplicate it because they all look the same. So I'm going to come here for the font. Then semi-bold 16. Then the color, I want a strong black. Background, I want white. Yes. Padding 20. So I have to remove this padding that comes by default. Then border radius of 20. Then instead of enter value, it's going to say name. And this looks good. I need space between the profile picture view and the form view. So I need to go to their parent component and add gap. All right, let's go back. I think that's okay. So in the form, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a keyboard avoiding view. And I'm going to take my text input, I'm going to put it inside there. So what this does in the situation where we open this on an Android or iOS device and we try to access this lower input, the keyboard might obstruct this input. So by using keyboard aware scroll view, it avoids that. That's good. We have name, we have email, we have phone, then we have address. Change the placeholders. Okay, and since they're attaching, we go to the parent component, styles, and add some gap. And yeah, this is starting to look a bit similar. So now we have name, email, phone, and address. So what we need to do, we need to add the button. Button looks like it needs a bit of padding. So radius, I'm going to put something like 30. And here it's just going to say save. That looks okay. In primary color, it's going to be dark green. And yeah, the text is a bit small, I guess. And now we have a button. So what we need to do, we need to create variables for these inputs. So if I come here, I can see that all the inputs are sharing one variable. So notice something funny that happens. When I try to enter my name, it enters them in all these inputs. Why? Because if we go to variables, they're all sharing this text input value variable. And you can see here it says 4 components. So these are the 4 components, 1, 2, 3, 4, that are all sharing this variable. So I need to create an individual variable for each of these inputs. So name, it's going to be string, email, phone, address. And lastly, let's not forget image. Then now we can go to this text input and we can delete it. We go to name, data, then where it says data source, I'm going to give it the variable that I created. Okay, so now they are now independent. But then remember, when we created this account, we supplied the email and we supplied the name. So these should be disabled. So if I go to name and I see here where it says editable, I'll just say false. Email editable, I'll just say false. Okay, that's good. So now when we enter the phone number or the address, or when we enter the image and click save, we should save this information in the backend. So first, before we do that, let's deal with this image. So if we go to profile, let's close the form. We have this icon button. So when you click this icon button, I want to open the image picker. And this image picker is going to return an image called response, which I'm going to set to the variable called image. So what this is doing, when I click this and pick an image, it's going to set that image to the variable code image. So as we speak, this variable code image now is holding that image. So if we go to image, data, URL, we can actually display that image. Right? We're not sending it anyway, we're just displaying it. It's not really finding that image since the application refreshed. So it becomes a bit confusing. So to solve this, let's go back to the image and add some border. So we can see that there's an image that's supposed to be there. This is much better. So now when I add this image, it then gets added to this part. Then when I add the phone number, the address, and I click save, I want to send those to the backend. So if we head over to Xano, we go back, we'll notice there's this endpoint code, user, edit user. So what this is doing is taking in the image, the address, the phone number, then it's editing that user. How does it know which user to edit? It knows because we need to send it the auth token. So the auth token, remember when we logged in, we stored the auth token. So now whenever we need to make a call to our backend, we're going to be sending that auth token. The backend knows what to do with that auth token. It knows like who does this auth token belong to, and then it can edit that user. So let's head back. Whenever we need to make a call to the backend, we have to make sure that we've created that backend API, so onboarding service, and we can see edit user info. So I went ahead and I created this. It's a post request, and this is the path, then this is the data that it accepts. So now in my application, when the user clicks save, I just need to save that information. But before we do that, let's have some loading. Right, and initially it's going to be false. Then let's go to the button data, and when it's loading, it should link to this loading variable. So now when you click that button, you're going to make an API call to onboarding service, and we're going to edit the user. Then it asks us the phone number, so we just link our variable. It asks us the address, we just link the address from our variable. It asks us the profile picture, we just link our image variable, and we're done. But then we need to know that something is happening. So we need to set a variable. So as we start, we set loading to true. When it ends, we set loading to false. So yeah, we set loading to true. Then here, we're going to set loading to false. Okay, perfect. So now, here we can't enter name. So let's just have phone number. Then let's have our image. Then we click save. And it gets saved. So to see that it was saved, let's go back to our backend. Because right now, we're not refreshing. We don't have a way to know since we haven't built that functionality yet. And we can see the phone number here. Let's go back, put something obvious. So for phone number, let me put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then save. Then let's go to our Xano backend, refresh. Then we can see 1, 2, 8. So that means it's working. So now the next part, when the user visits this page, we need to fetch their information if it exists and populate these fields. So how do we do that? Let's go back to Xano and see if we have an API endpoint for that. So yeah, we're editing. Here we're getting the status. Then now we want the user information. So for this, it returns us the record of that user if it exists. So let's go back to our data, onboarding, then get user info is already there. So when the user first visits the screen on onboarding personal, so on screen focus, what we want to do, we want to make an API request, gives us back a response to onboarding, and we want to get user info. And for now, I just want to console log this and see if something's actually coming back. So now, as it loads, let's wait, and there you go. So this is the user, and the user is actually coming back. So now, what I need to do, when the user first visits the screen, we're going to go to the backend, fetch their information, then populate these fields. And remember, this is very simple because these fields, they are linked to these variables. So we don't need to populate the fields. We just need to populate these variables using the set variable function. So on screen, instead of console logging, we're going to set variable. and we have 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first one that was setting is the image, and it's going to be response dot profile pic, right, dot URL. The second one is going to be name, and the name is going to be response dot name. Then email, and that's going to be response dot email. Then after email, we have phone. That's going to be response dot phone. And lastly, we have address. It's going to be response dot address. So now, as you can see, it fetches everything. Then let's see the image. The image is taking a bit of time, but that's okay. So now, if I head back to the onboarding, right, the onboarding fetches my information. Then when I click personal information, right, it goes to the database. Then it pre-fills those fields for me. But then we can't edit name, we can't edit email, right? But we can edit the phone number. So here I can change the phone number back to normal. I can change the address back to normal, save, right? Then how do we know that this actually saved? We can go back, then re-add. As you can see, it's now coming fresh from the backend. So this onboarding personal screen is done. Let's head back to onboarding. And so this was the first processable that we clicked, took us to personal information. So now we need to hook up the next part, which is going to be the education. So we need to create a new screen called Onboarding Education. And then in onboarding, when you click the second pressable, we're going to navigate to onboarding education. And on onboarding education, on navigate, we want to show the header, but then when a user navigates back, we just want to navigate back. Then we go to config, we center the header, and perfect. So now when we go back to onboarding, right, everything now works. So if you go to personal information, then we go back, we go to education, we go back. So that now works. Okay, so next up, we're going to be working on the onboarding education screen. So let's take a look. So we have this education, we can call them education cards. It shows the name of the university, the program which you did, then the period that you did it. Then on the right side, we have an edit. Then below that, we have an add new education button. So what we need to do here, we need a view to hold both of these cards. Then we need a view to hold the button, or just one view to hold all the cards and the button. I'm thinking separate, right? Then each individual card is going to have two views. So the text, then the icon. And there's going to be space in between them. So we call this justify space between. So let's take a look. And always we add padding and background color. Let's take a look. It's there. So it's slate 200. Then on cards, we're going to have an individual card. And inside that individual card, we have two views. So the first one to hold the text. So we'll call this text. Then the second one was holding an icon. So in the first one, we're going to have three text inputs. Sorry, not text inputs, just three text component. Then here, we're going to have an icon button since we need to be able to click it. the first text says enter, so this needs to be a bit bold, 16, and it needs to be strong black. So this is the university name. Yeah, something like that. And the second one, so the name of the program that you did, regular 14, and you can say medium. It's okay, or let's give it medium. Then lastly, this one, the same size, medium 14, the color medium, then 2010 to 2014. So something like this. Okay, then inside there we need some space in between those texts, so gap of 5. That looks good. Then on the card we're going to flex the direction, and then we're going to add space in between. So this will be on the left, this will be on the right, there'll be space in between. They have a background of white, so we go to background, we put white. So Draftbit is very simple. As I'm seeing it, I'm just doing it. There's nothing special that you need to know, so just do it as you see it. We add a bit of padding there. Then if I see that, this is not really aligned, I can come here to this icon, then I can say go to the center. All right, if it doesn't, I'll try the next one, then it goes to the center. So yeah, Draftbit is not complicated. Then here we need this edit, and this looks good, but I think I'm missing something. The border radius, we need it to be 20. And yeah, this looks perfect. So what we need to do now, go back to onboarding, config, and click scrollable. Because if we don't, then we can't scroll through this. And you can imagine these can be 50 universities. Well, it's not going to be 50 universities for a single person, but yeah, you get the point. If someone has like maybe 10 educations, then they won't be able to fit on the screen. So we need to think about that and how we're going to scroll through them and stuff like that. So yeah, let's just have 3. Then let's add some gap in between them. Perfect. So yeah, the colors are a bit darker than mine, but that's okay. I think the idea is coming across. Then below that, we need a button. So if we click add button, and we'll see the button, the background is white. And the radius, I think is 20. Then enter 16. And the text on the button is medium, and the button says create education, and the button is an icon. So in data, other configurations, we can add an icon, and I think it was just a plus icon. All right, go back to button. Yeah, this kind of looks nice, but that's not what we're supposed to do. So the background is supposed to be white, and the color is supposed to be medium. Right, and here let's add some gap of 20. And I think the button needs a bit of padding. So whenever you add padding, don't forget to also update the radius. Perfect. So add education. Let's see. It has a border. So if we go back, the button is a bit tiny. And to do that, we just come back to the button view and we center align it. It's going to make the button tiny. Then we need some border. So border width of 1, and the color, I think it's just medium. Yeah, something like this. So this is something that we had. Yeah, starting to look similar. So we have create education. So here it says add new education, not create education. So add new, it doesn't have to be identical, but yeah, because I think what's important is getting the point across. So add new education. So this is what the add new education looks like. When we click add new education button, a bottom drawer pops up, and then we're able to enter the name of the university, the program, your specialty of study, the date you started, and the date you finished. Okay, so how do we do this? To do this, head over to Onboarding Education, Component Picker, then we're going to use something called Bottom Sheet. So bottom sheet acts as a view, but then it comes up from the bottom. As you can see, it's already there. And this is going to be called Create, right? And on this bottom sheet, we can go to its settings. We don't want it to always be showing like this. So where it says bottom snap position, we make this 100. So that hides it, which is what we want. Then top snap position, we're going to make it about 30. Right? These are going to make sense in a few. Okay, then I guess that's it. Then for button, when we click the button, we want to open it. So just search for bottom sheet, and you see everything that we can do on this bottom sheet. We can close it, we can expand it, which is what we're trying to do. Then it's going to ask us, so I want to expand the create. So now when I click, it's going to open the bottom sheet, but then now I have no way of closing it. I can always drag it down, right? But then that's not ideal. So I need a way to be able to close it here. So if I come into this create, click add, then I'm going to add a view. Then inside this view, I'm going to have an icon. So let's have a text and then an icon. So we have a text, then I have an icon button. So the text is going to be enter, we can say semi-bold, 16. Then this is just going to say create education. Right, then we can come back here. So I want it on the flex end with a gap of about 20 and direction of row. So yeah, it's going to be like this. Then let's remove this. Okay, something like this, but then I guess this can be 60. Yeah, something like this. Create education, then yeah. And I guess we can align it. So now everything is aligned. And this icon button is going to be for closing it. This, then on click, we're going to close the bottom sheet. It's going to ask you which bottom sheet do you want to close. Then we're going to close the create bottom sheet. So now we open, we close it. Then let's take a look at how this looks like on an iOS device. Okay, so this is what it looks like on an iOS device. We open it up, then we close it. Perfect. Let's head back to web preview. Open, close. Let's go back to our design. So we need 3 inputs: our name, program, so school, degree, then study. So inside here, we have another view, and we're going to call this view form. And in this create, we're going to add some padding of 20. And in this form, so the funny thing is I already have this form, right? So instead of, duplicating all these things all the time, I can just come in here, mark it for copy, go back to education, form, then paste it. Yeah, just to save time. Then here, the gap is going to be 20. Then name, duplicate, then duplicate. Then we need dates, which is going to be 2 date pickers. So 1, 2, then this is going to be from, this is going to be 2, then the dates, we're going to flex them. Then the first one, we're going to give it a width. So if we come here where it says width, if we click this, we can set a dynamic width, which I'm going to do now, which is going to be the window width, right, divided by 2.2, I guess. 2 is going to be window width divided by 2.2, right? Then in between these guys, we need space between, I guess. See what that looks like. Okay, so space in between doesn't work. Let's have gap of maybe 5. Okay, maybe 10. Okay, perfect. Then lastly, we need a button. And again, for this, let's see what that looks like. We just get that button from this button view. We can, and I think the button view wasn't the same, but then this button from here, mark for copy, button education, then inside the form, or I guess inside the create, we paste the button. Then let's see what that looks like. Okay, we have some gap here. Okay, then the dates aren't looking that nice. So here, where it says divided by 2.2, I'll say 2.1. Then here I'll say 2.1. Okay, now 2.3. Yes, so it's supposed to be 2.3 so that it's smaller, because right now it's too big. 2.3. And perfect. And date. So instead of saying date, let's add some label. Say from. Right. So now that says from, then to. So you started from to. Then here is school, degree, then lastly study. Then again, we need variables for this. So the first date picker is going to be from, date. Second one, to, date. Loading, I need it. Name, I don't need it. Also, maybe when I copied the button, came over with the variables. Right? Yeah, this variable is used by one component button. So when I copied the button, it came over with the variables. So that's something maybe that we don't want. Okay, so from, to, loading. Then now we need school. We need degree. Then we need study, which is the program that you studied. Okay, that looks decent. Now let's go to Xano, back. Let's look for the education. So post education, this is how we create the education. Then here, when we run, we see what it needs. It needs the school, degree, study, from, and to date, and we have all these. So let's go back here to data, onboarding service, new API. Then we're going to say create education. And this is a post request. We're creating education, and the path, it's like this. Then it's asking us, what does the request body look like? It looks like this. But then since we're going to be using this in our code, we need to make this into variables. So variables, they notify Draftbit that these values, we're going to add them later. Then study, then from, and to. From, then to. Then lastly, header. So header, we're going to be adding what's called the authorization token. And where is it coming from? It's coming from our global state token. Then on tests, we're going to skip the test, skip test, save. Now we have access to this in our screens. So when you click in Add Education, when you click the button on press, we're going to set this variable and set this variable, but we're not going to do this. So this came from the previous screen when we copied and pasted the button. So what we're going to do, we're going to make an API request, and this API request is going to return a response. It's on onboarding, and it's called create education. Then you see, since we created those variables, it now asks us, I need school. Then you come in here, then you're going to put the school. Then it's going to ask us for degree. Then you're going to put degree, study. Then you're going to put study. Then it's going to ask you from. So you put from date to date. Then we're going to log this on the screen. So now, last thing that's left to do is go to our button. And when our button is loading, we're going to click loading. So now when the user comes, they click add education. Oh, remember we created the variables, but then we didn't update the inputs. So let's go to school data. Then this is school. We go to degree. This is degree. Then we go to study. Then this links to study. Right? Very simple. Then from date and to date, that's already there. Let's try again. Click add. The last thing that we didn't do again is update the placeholders. So yeah, we have placeholder. So I'm going to say school. Then here, I'm going to say degree. Then on study, I'm going to say study. Okay, so now when we click add, everything looks perfect. Let's hope it works. So for school, oh, the editable is false. Yeah, so you see the the risk of copying and pasting. You bring back, some extra work. Okay, now it works. So MSU University Comp Science, then study web dev. Then here, just put a random year. Then we save. And voila, it worked. So what we need to do now is go to our database, then go to education, then refresh. And we're going to look for MSU University Comp Science Web Dev. So we know that it was working. So next up, we need to then populate this, right, with real data. So first thing that we need to do, we need to create a variable. I'm going to call it education data. It's going to be an object array, and by default, it's going to be empty. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my Xano backend and see here we're able to get the education. And going to be able to get all records of an education. So get request. Head over here, we create a new endpoint, get education, then get mini, path education, then headers. It's going to be like this. Authorization. Then we pass in the token. Then we can skip test. So we skip test because we don't have access to the token when we're inside here. Right? So onboarding, when the screen comes on to focus, we're going to make an API call to that request that we just created. That's called get education. And what we're going to do for now, we want to console log so we can see if something is coming back. And yeah, something is coming back. So what we do next, we're going to set variable, that variable that we just created, education data, we're going to set it with the response. Right? So that's done, but nothing shows up because we need, so let's delete these cards, just leave one card. Then on this one card, we're going to add a parent component called a list. And this list is going to ask us for data. We're going to give it the education data. All right. And then now on text, instead of university name, we're going to make this a variable. And this is now going to be item dot school. Right. And now this is coming from the backend. Then for this, it's going to be degree. Okay, perfect. So this is now coming from the backend. So every time we open this page, we're now getting the schools from the backend. And inside this list, just want to add some gap because when we now have many of them, the gap is going to disappear. Then let's remove the gap from this. Perfect. So one last thing that I need to do, when I've clicked add, this response is coming back with more data, with the updated version of the data. So I just need to update the education data with the newly added item. So now, when I click add new education, then I'll say MSU2. Yeah, so this is the school that I went to, so I don't really have any other examples. Say webdev2, then save. Right, perfect. We can see we now have 2 schools that were added. And even in the back end, we can see this was actually reflected. So when this is added, what we want to do, we want to close the bottom sheet. So just search bottom sheet, then close bottom sheet. Then we're going to search create bottom sheet. And yeah, perfect. So now when you create, right, all this test, create, closes, adds. And if we go back to onboarding, right, tells us we're now 50% complete. Why? Because we've completed the education, and the system can now see that we've completed the education. That's why it's now on 50%. So when we do experience, it's going to go to 75%. When you do resume, it's going to go to 100%. And we're not yet done. So what we need to do on onboarding education, we need to create a new variable. This variable is going to be called selected item ID. It's going to be a string. So what happens if we go to this button here on the card, icon button. So this item here, when you click it, I need to set some variables. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or the dates. I'm not really concerned with them for now. So the first one that I want to set is my selected ID. And whenever you select something from a list, it brings back a single instance of that item. So for example, if we have a group of users and you click Douglas, in here you're going to be able to access properties of Douglas. So in here we can access the item that we clicked, we can access its list item, then we're going to fetch the ID. Then up next, we're going to set the school, and we're going to set the school list item dot school. After school, we have degree. We're going to set list item degree. So this is so that when we open the edit, these fields are already pre-filled. Then here, we're going to set study, which is going to be list item dot study. Okay, this looks good. Right now, when we click, it sets, but nothing happens. What we now need to do, we need to duplicate the create, right? Call this edit. Then now, when we open this text, instead of create education, we're going to be editing. We're just going to say edit education. And this close button, instead of closing, or closing edit. Okay, that's okay. So now, on our card, when we click this, after setting all this variable, we're going to open the edit. So now, MSU University, and you see, it opens and MSU University is pre-filled. Let's go back. There's some things that we left out, like the dates. So let's set that. So first, it's from date. We're going to set it with list item. And in the list item is called start underscore date. Then here we have to date, and here it's called list item dot end date. So now everything is perfect, right? And you can see 2023, whatever is there. And now we need to set up the edit functionality. When we click this button that says save, we need to come in here, and instead of create here, we're going to edit. But right now we don't have that functionality set up. So we need to come back here. Then we need to come here, which is education, post education.edit. We need to copy this, go back here, then onboarding, then edit, education, it's a post, education, you just say create, it's okay, edit, then we go back, and see and see what the body looks like. Make these variables like I always say. Then headers, so we don't forget that we need to include the token. So authorization is just including our token. Then variable, then test. We skip the test, save. Right, so now inside here, instead of creating, we're going to change this to edit education. Right, school, study, degree, then this is from, then this is to, then the ID is the selected item ID. And now let's console log the response. Let's remove everything else. MSU2, change that to MSU40, and voila, everything works. Perfect. Let's go back to onboarding. All right, 50% done. So right now, we're done with our personal information. That works. We're done with our education. That works. We can create new education. We can edit this education. So test can be test 2024. And that gets updated. And next up, we need to look at experience. Then up next, we're going to be looking at the onboarding experience. So for this one, to make our lives easier, we're going to copy education, then we're going to duplicate it, since these screens are similar. But then we're going to have to change a whole lot of things. So education experience, then go back to onboarding. And when you press the third pressable, which is experience, we're going to navigate to onboarding education. So now when you click experience, you go to onboarding experience, but it still says onboarding education just because we need to change a whole lot of things. Or maybe I made a mistake. No, it's onboarding experience. Sorry about that. Okay, so now, perfect. This needs to be centered. So we go to navigate, onboarding experience. Then we put this in the center. Then when you click the back icon, it needs to navigate back. So it's doing that already. So we go to onboarding experience. Then we're going to change up some things. So first, when we head over there, we're going to fetch the education. But then now, it's not education that we're fetching, but we're now fetching experience. So get underscore experience. Then we go to Xano experience, get experience, and it's like this. So the object that we're getting is experience. We're getting many, and inside here we just need to pass in the auth token. Okay, then on screen focus, instead of getting education, we're now getting experience. Then instead of setting education data, go to our variable. Instead of education data, we rename this to experience data. Now we go back, then we're going to log the response, see what that looks like. Right, we'll test that once we add some education. So I guess there would be nothing since we haven't added any experience. So we're going to test that once we add some experience. Then we're going to come back here and we probably need to change these. So for name, it's going to be like company name, stuff like that. So let's close this up. So yeah, it's no longer add new education, it's add new experience. And when you click this, we're going to open the create experience. And in here, instead of create education, it's going to be create experience. Right. Then let's go back to experience, post experience, run. Then this is what our experience needs. But first, let's get the endpoint, onboarding, new endpoint, then create experience. It's going to be a post request, experience, create, then the path, then the request body, we need job title, we need job type, then in the headers we need the token, authorization, token, then we skip, save. First thing, job title, job type. So yeah, title, type, company, then start date, end date. So I guess we kind of have them, except for school, title, type, title type, name. So now when we're clicking add, instead of create education, it's create experience. Then job title, it's going to be title, job type, it's going to be type, company name, it's going to be name, loading from degree. So I guess I didn't save that. Go back to variables, look for degree. This needs to be name. Okay, it's having issues, so say company name. We go back here, then for company name, we now have the proper variable for company name. Start date is going to be from date, end date is going to be to date. Okay, starting to look good. We need to update this. So this now needs to say job title and needs to link to the title. Then type needs to link to the type, and the placeholder needs to say type. Then company name, this needs to link to company name. The placeholder needs to say company name. And as far as I know, that's okay. Then we click add, job title, say software dev, type, remote, company name, Draftbit, save. Okay, perfect. And we have this information here. See what that looks like. Right now we're not getting anything. But then if I leave this page and come back, I bet I should be able to get something. And you see, we go up to 75%. So this means our logic is working. So experience fetches that, should get to see what that looks like. Okay, so yeah, we have a job title. So if I go to my experience, then I go to card, list, then text. So the name here I'm going to say it's no longer school, it's now company underscore name. Then yeah, don't worry about that red screen. It's trying to actually quickly update. Then after that, we have the job title, which is this part. So instead of degree, it's going to be title, and that's going to be a list item dot job title. Then the dates are okay and perfect. Let's remove this. Then what we need to do now, when we click this, edit, when we click that, it needs to set the variable selected item ID. So I think we have that. Then title needs to be set as job underscore title. Then type. Then this needs to be set as type. Then list item job underscore type. So title type. Let's remove this from to title type from to. Am I missing something? Company name. Then now we're going to set this to list item company underscore name. Selected item ID. That should be good. So now, let's go and fix those inputs. I think it should just be an input mapping issue. So title, type, name. Yeah, so that's the issue with copying and pasting. It saved us on the design, but I would say it's a bit confusing to follow and we have to change a lot of things. But it makes our life easier when we, as it pertains to the design and everything else. So here is going to be name, variable, company name, type. So now, perfect. So if I say I'm no longer remote, I'm now working full time, it won't work because we haven't configured the edit. So if we go back, then we go to experience, then edit. So this is our edit. So it's experience edit. So let's do this. Shouldn't be an issue. So if I come back here, click add, what I want to do first is I want to go to create experience, request body, and I'm going to copy this. Since it's just going to be the same, create a new endpoint, edit, experience, so post request, experience, path, we'll leave that for now. There we go, right? And date, start date, everything is there. Then I'm going to have my authorization. Authorization is going to be a token. Then the last thing that I don't have is my path. Okay, and once that's done, we're going to skip, save. Then now, when we click the save button, instead of editing education, we're now editing experience. And job title, job type, company name, start date from, then to. So everything else looks good. Then we're setting the experience data, that looks good. Yeah, I don't know if it'll work in one try, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so that didn't work. Yeah, because I was very doubtful that it was just going to work once. So let's see. Okay, title, this. Let's go back. I think there's an obvious reason, right? We need to pass in the item ID. What are you trying to edit? So we didn't pass that in, so it doesn't know what we're trying to edit. Data, then we're going to edit experience, request body, and then in between here, we're going to do this, then this is going to be ID, then we're going to save. All right, so now when you press, it's going to ask us for the ID, which is going to be the selected item ID. So now let's edit. It's no longer remote. It's a full-time position. And perfect, as we can see. Let's edit something that we can see directly. Software developer. Save that, and that changes. Let's go back to onboarding and come back. See if that persists. Experience, software developer. And this page is done. Then up next, we need to look at the resume. So here we're going to be uploading the resume, but I don't think we'll be able to edit a resume. So we just need to upload and then delete the resume. So we can have many resumes. Okay, then now we have onboarding resume. So again, I'm going to go to experience. Then I'm going to duplicate this. So it's not, extremely the same, but there's definitely some things that we can use from the last screen, right? Then I'm going to go back to onboarding. And when you click the fourth pressable, we're going to navigate to the resume page. So now when you click resume, you go to the resume page, and we go to the resume page, and we're going to center this heading. We were fetching the experience. We're going to be fetching the resume. So let's head over to Xano backend. Then here, we're going to be getting the resume. So it's just get request, it's getting a resume, and then we're passing in the token. Okay, then when it loads, we're going to get the resume. Then I just want to console log, and we go back to our variable, and instead of experience data, it's now called resume data. So in here, and the beauty about Draftbit is already updated for us. So now, I don't think we have anything. So we don't have any resume data yet. Guess we need to post that first, but then later on we'll be able to see what that looks like. Let's close that. Let's close this. Let's close the create, delete the edit. We don't need that. Then on create, let's see what the design looks like. So here, and add a new resume. So it looks like this. It's going to have this icon. Click to upload, then this text, then add profile. This form, we're going to delete everything. Then here, I'm just going to say upload resume. And in here, we're going to delete this. Then in here, we don't, I guess we'll need the gap. So 20 padding. There's no background color, but there is a border, and it's like a gray border. So just say medium for now. Then inside there, we have an icon. Then we have two texts. With the first one saying, click to upload. And this looks like enter semi-bold 18. Then docs PDF. So docs PDF 2 MB. Right? Something along these lines. This is going to be 16. Font will be enter. The font weight medium. The text like this. Yeah, something like this. Then let's try to have everything on the center, I guess. Yeah, something like that. Then the icon needs to be upload. Right. Yeah, it's looking decent. Let's see. There's some radius. Okay, perfect. Right. Then I'm going to wrap this inside a pressable. Okay, that looks okay. Then I'm going to delete these variables that I no longer need. Resume data, selected ID, title, to type. Guess I do need somewhere to store the resume. In here, show resume. This is going to be a boolean. So I'm going to duplicate this. Here, it's going to be resume. And this is not going to be shown. So show resume. Show resume false, like this. Then this will be show resume is true. Perfect. Click to upload. Right. Then when you upload, we need this smaller thing that says file.pdf. So that's going to be this. So we just needs an icon and a text, so we can remove this. Then for now it will just say file.pdf. Then here on the icon, we're going to look for a file that says PDF. Then in here, I'm going to add gap of 20 is a bit much, say 10. No idea what that looks like, but I can just take a peek. If I say, right, you can see what that looks like. So here I need to do this as a row. Perfect. This is what we need. Right, and let's go back here. Let's remove this. So now we can add. So if you go back to pressable and on click, what we want to do, we want to select a file, right? And the file is going to be called response. And once we select that file, we want to set two variables. The first variable is we want to set show resume to true. Then we want to set resume with the file that we uploaded here. Hope that makes sense. So now we click here, we pick a resume, then voila, then we can save that resume. So now when we come here and we click save, we're able to save that resume. So let's go back. Then back, right? So post resume needs a resume, which is just a file resource. It is a post request. So let's go and check if we have that already. We don't. So yeah, we're going to call this create a resume post. Then this is a resume create. This is a resume request.body. It's going to be a resume. And in here, we need to make this a variable. And always remember, we're going to be adding our authorization token. So this will depend on which backend you're using, but most backends, we're going to be using this authorization token. We're going to test this, skip, then we save. So now, instead of creating experience, because remember we copied this, we're going to be creating resume. It's going to ask us for the resume, which is just a file, right? That's what we're going to send. Then we're going to set the resume data, set loading. Perfect. Let's test this out. And voila, we have something. So let's go back to onboarding, click resume. Right, let's see what this looks like. And if we go inside resume URL, we can access the name, which is what we want to display in the card. So if we go on list, resume data, that's perfect. Then on the text, on the name list, it's going to be resume URL dot name. And there we go. What else? I don't think we need anything else, right? We could display the size but yeah, we don't need anything else. So let's delete these other two. Delete. Then we have this icon. So remember, instead of editing, we don't have the functionality to be able to edit a resume. So in this case, we're just going to delete. So let's do this. And when we click this, we want to delete the resume. We don't have the functionality right now. We come in here, resume, create a new endpoint, delete resume. And if we go back here to our endpoint, we have this endpoint. It's a delete endpoint, and it takes in a resume ID like this. So it's delete endpoint, and it takes it in like that. So if we come in here, we call this a delete endpoint resume delete. Then here on path, right, this is where it becomes a bit tricky. We need to add the curly braces here because this is the variable, and it's going to demand that I put a number, so I'll just put 1 as the ID. Then on headers, we always have our authorization, and we put the token, then test, then save. So when you click the button for delete, we come in here, We're going to remove everything, and the only variable that we're going to be setting is going to be the data. So now I'm going to make an API request, and it's going to bring us back a response, onboarding, and delete resume. And on ID, the list item brings back an ID of the item that we clicked, so we know what we're deleting. And now, instead of setting the ID, we're going to set the resume data with the new response with the data that was deleted. So if we go back, we have this. Let's upload another one. Right, so there's a new one, and delete. That gets deleted. Our profile is 100% complete, but we still haven't finished onboarding because we haven't created an application profile. So as I explained before, let's say you have the skills of a web developer, but you also have the skills of a mobile developer. When you're applying to jobs, you might want to pinpoint a certain job. So that's why we need to create a profile. So a profile is just going to be a name. Then you pick the resume. So we're just going to be selecting the resume that we want to use to apply. Then we're going to select the experience. Then we're going to select the education. So when you're applying to jobs, you might use the mobile development profile, or you might use the web development profile. So that's what we're going to look at next. Then lastly, we're going to look at the onboarding profile. So I went ahead and I duplicated onboarding resume. Then let's do some cleaning up. Okay, so this is onboarding profile, and resume data becomes profile data. And firstly, let's go back to onboarding. In application profile, we're going to get the application profile data. Copy this, go to our data, onboarding, new endpoint, then get app data, then application. This is going to be a get mini, right? Then header is going to be authorization token. Skip. And inside, instead of getting resume, onboarding app data. Let's take a look what that looks like. So right now we have nothing. So again, we can take a look. Here it says add new experience. And go create profile. Let's remove that. Then here, create profile. And then variables, we just need a name, which is going to be of type string. And the name, we need education options, which is going to be an object array. After education options, we need experience options, which is going to be an object array. Then we need resume options, which is going to be an array. So education, okay, experience was deleted by mistake. And you're going to see in a moment why we need this. Okay, so in our form, let's remove everything in the form. Better yet, let's delete that. Go to education. So there was a form in education. So I would say mark this for copy, come back to our profile, then inside create, we're going to paste that form. And we're going to unmark this like this. We don't need the dates. We don't need the study. We just need this. We're going to rename it to name. Then we go to variables, education. Now let's delete what we don't need. Then we need a variable called form data, object, save. Okay, perfect. So when you come here and it first runs, we get the app data, then we set that to the profile data. So that's okay. But then now when we click create profile, right? So this is no longer school. This is now name, and it needs name. So you need to name your profile. And after this, let's have multi-select pickers. So 1, 2, 3. The first one is going to be for education. Then the second one is going to be for experience. Then the third one is going to be for resume. Now, think this through, right? You click add. Then you come here and you select education. We need to pick education that we have already entered in past videos, right? So we have to go back to onboarding. And what we entered here in education needs to then be available on the profile screen. So if I go to principle 5, we forgot to set this up. Then destination is going to be profile, right? So now, when we click application profile and create profile, here it says select an option. We're going to be fetching the education that we entered from the backend, and then we're going to be displaying it here. So we're going to say education. Then here we're going to say experience. Then here we're going to say resume. And to do that, I already have a backend API to do that. This function called get user info. When we run it, it doesn't really need anything, it just needs the token. We go back to the backend, new API, and get user info, or get user options, right? It's a get request. It's getting, let's say, profile. Then here we're getting many, I guess. Then headers, authorization, token, then we save. Okay, perfect. So now on onboarding profile, we go here. So let's make another API request down here. This time it's going to be called user options. Onboarding. This time we're getting user options. Then let's console log them so you see what they look like. User options. And this is what it looks like. Let me delete this. Right. So we have options for education. We have options for experience. Then we have option for resume. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back here. Then I'm going to set the variable that's called something like along the lines of options. So not resume options, not profile data or form data. And we're setting it with user options. Okay. Then now let's go to education. So it's a multi-selector picker, and on options, I'm going to say form data dot education options. So don't mind the errors. The error is it's updating too fast. So before I select, it's already updated and I haven't finished. Right, so now we can select. So you see, we get MSU University Test 2024 MSU. We get those, those educations that we're putting. We're now fetching them from the backend, and we're now able to get these. We can now select, right? Which is brilliant. Do the same thing for experience. So if we go to experience, options, form data, experience, and resume, options, form data, then resume options. Okay, so now when we click add, we can select education, we can select experience, right? And we can select our resume. So let's do it like this. Then here, save. Let's give it some gap of 40. Yeah, like this. Then we can see here. However, let's increase it to 80. Okay, perfect. Now everything is out of the way. Then add. First, we need to create the route for that. Okay, so add profile, which is going to be a post request. And in here is going to be profile create. Let's go back. Let's look for the profile. And then this is how we create a profile. Let's try to run it. This is the information that we need. Application underscore profile. So here, application underscore profile. Then on the request body, we need this. The user ID, EXPs, then resumes. Something like this, right? Then here, authorization will be token. Then let's test this out. So when we click add, here, instead of creating a resume like before, we're going to be adding a profile and the name, we have it. The education, right? Let's go back and see if our form, so multi-selected value, no. Right, so this is education options. Then the next one is experience options. Then this one, experience options, resume options. Right, then I go back, click add to profile, education options, experience options, then resume options. Then when done, we set the user or the profile data. So that's already up to speed. Okay, let's create. So name is going to be software dev. Going to pick just one, and just one. Then I'm going to save. Then that gets saved. But then we need to go back, then come back so we can see what that data looks like, right? So it's saved, but we need to see what this data looks like. So we're getting ID created at name. So if we go back to profile, cards, then the text, we need to target the name. So we come in here, list item dot name. Right, and we'll see that this is the profile for the software dev. Okay, then up next, we need to know how can we delete these. All right. right? So when we have a profile, right? So let's open this function. It's very, very long. This is for deleting. So if we come back here, onboarding, we create a new one. We'll say delete profile and delete profile, delete, and we need to pass it in the application ID and the authorization, which is going to be a token. Then let's save this. Okay, so it needs a variable since we're passing it an ID. Then we can move forward. Okay, perfect. So now when a user clicks this to remove, we just come here and instead of deleting resume, we delete profile. Ask us for the profile ID, which is going to be this dot ID. Then the response that we get, we set it to the profile data. So let's create another profile. So first one is software, then this one will be mobile dev. Then pick another university, same experience, same resume since I only have one. We save, now we have two. Let's delete the first one and that gets deleted. Let's see if that is persisted. Go back and we still have one. So perfect. Everything is now working perfectly. Then lastly, what we need to do. So after you've created this, I guess we can say you're done with onboarding. So we need a button here that says complete onboarding. So if we head back to profile, we close this, then we close this, then we duplicate this. We need a button here. The button will say completed on. This button won't have this. So I would say complete onboarding. Yeah. Later on, we're going to make this, programmatically. The system will just know when you've completed. But I guess for now, this we have to do. So now, when you click this button, instead of what we're doing before, we need to go back to this. And we have this function, which we can call is onboarding complete. It's a get request, then profile, it's getting one, right? Then authorization headers, authorization token, then here we can skip, save. Then when you click this button, we'll make an API call to return a response. We're going to call this service called is onboarding complete. So it's like we're asking the backend fulfilled everything that needs to be filled, and the backend is going to return us an answer. So now let's take a look. Let me clear my logs. Right? Is onboarding complete? Then it tells us, yes, onboarding is complete. So what we need to do here, we need to take this, go back, have an if statement, right? Then we'll say if response dot is complete, right? That means onboarding is complete. So what we need to do, we need to navigate to the home screen. If it's not yet complete, right? Right now, let's just alert. Later on, we can have a nice message, but for now, we'll just say error, right? Then we'll say, please complete onboarding. Okay, so I went ahead, created a basic home screen, and that's okay. So let's go ahead to back to our button. Then now we can navigate to the home screen when you've completed onboarding. Then lastly, what I want to do, so we have a loading, and we want to set the variable so that we have some loading, because right now we don't have any loading functionality. So yeah, loading will be true. Then at the end, loading will be false. Then let's go to the button, loading. Then let's tie this up to the loading feature. Then just go back. So you come back as a user, you see that your profile is 100% complete, your application 100% complete. So you click complete onboarding. Then it takes you home if you've completed. If you haven't, it alerts, hey, sorry, you haven't completed. So yeah, I think that we have to do for now. So let's fix up some things. So remember on login, let's go back to our login button. Let's click here and let's stop this process, and then let's console log. So when we log in, we want to see what that response looks like. So let's go back to our login. Then we'll say Douglas 2024 at gmail.com 1234567 login. Right, we see what that looks like. So we have an auth token, then we have a user, so we can say user dot onboarding complete. Right, so we're going to need to use this. So we are going to have a if statement. So before we do that, let's see what this was doing. So this was checking if our login was a success, right? So I guess that's good. Then it was navigating to onboarding. But then before that, we need another if statement in here that then checks if the response.user.onboarding is complete, right? Then we navigate home because it means we've completed onboarding, right? But if we have an completed onboarding, then we go to onboarding. Then here we can, so I guess this needs to happen before that, right? So set the token. Says login was a success. Do we need to display that? I don't think so. Because you know that login was a success if we log in. Right? So now if I log in, Douglas at 2024 at gmail.com 1234567 then I log in. It should take me home, right? Because I've completed onboarding. Why should I go through onboarding again when I've completed it, right? And I guess the ultimate test to know if this actually works is to log in as another user. So here where it says I don't have an account, let's set that up. So now we're actually setting things up, right? And we're actually getting this to actually start working. When you don't have an account, you need to register. Right? Don't have an account, takes me to register. Then I'll say Douglas 2025 at gmail.com 1234567 then I'll create that account. So now Douglas 2025 at gmail.com 1234567 now I go to onboarding because I'm a new user. I haven't started or I haven't done anything with onboarding. So yeah, thank you for watching. In this video, we covered a lot of things, right? We covered how to register a user, how to log in that user, and how to authenticate with the backend and finish the onboarding process. In the next video, we're going to be covering how we can fetch jobs from the backend, how we can search for jobs, how we can apply to these jobs using this profile that we just created. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.